everyone wants the same thing. Everyone wants a happy, harmonious, prosperous country. And they just have different visions of how to get to that point.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Chatter, a podcast from The Gist. On today's show, we're talking to Tatton from Simple Politics. He started Simple Politics to try and help people get a grounding in issues of the day. So if someone becomes interested in politics and wants to try and understand more about what's going on, that they can go to Simple Politics and have it broken down for them in an easy to digest way without all the jargon. So we chatted all about, why he started Simple Politics, about Brexit, about the Irish border issue, about House of Lords reform. We covered a lot, so I hope you enjoy the conversation. Before we start, don't forget you can share this podcast with all your friends on social media, on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or on YouTube, so that way you never miss an episode. So here's Tatton and I. I think the BBC is centre-right, and a friend of mine thinks they're a left-wing rag. So
yeah. They're famously anti-Brexit. They did a count on the Mars show of guests who were Remainers and Brexiteers, but they included Benedict Cumberbatch as a Remainer. He was a Remainer, but the interview obviously was about his movie or whatever he was doing. And they also included Theresa May as a Remainer.
Well, I don't know if she counts anymore. What, post-election interviews? Or is this like an analysis of like...
Analysis? No, since the Brexit vote, there have been loads more Remainers on Mar than Brexiteers, but that does include Theresa May and lots of other people who, basically...
that probably counts Jeremy Corbyn as well. Since he campaigned for Remain, they probably count him as well in that.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. You can find whatever you want to say. Anyone is biased towards anyone else, because if you twist things and look at things through different perspectives, yeah.
In fact, if those two were still Remainers, there wouldn't be a conversation.
No. No, it's quite clear that Theresa May wants Brexit to happen.
I'm not so sure. And
you're not so sure?
I'm not so sure, right? So, Tatton, welcome to the show. But just on that point, I'm really confused about what Theresa May is at with the whole calling Russia out on their propaganda or whatever you want to call it. She said, we know what you're doing. You're trying to wage an information war. We won't let it happen. This is bad, Russia. Don't do this, essentially.
Yeah.
But there's also a parliamentary probe into the effects of Russian bots and troll factories and social media manipulation and adverts into how that affected the Brexit vote. So by condemning Russia and claiming that they're trying to hijack democracy, she's almost tacitly admitting that they may have had something to do with the Brexit vote and that it might be illegitimate. And I really don't know where that goes for her, because she's stood up on 2 occasions now in the last week and been like, Russia, this is bad. Don't be meddling in elections. Whilst at the same time, her entire thing is just will of the people.
Yeah. There seems to be, there is definitely some social media interference coming from Russia, and there's a lot of people who do a lot of research, clever people who claim that Russia goes much deeper than a few bots.
Yeah,
and there's all the money backing.
Well, I would be very inclined to believe a lot of that, having done plenty of research.
Yes, I don't know how much I believe. It's. Certainly we're living in completely unprecedented times politically, and to what extent those have been driven by Russian money deliberately trying to destabilize the political climate. It's very, very hard to tell, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, honestly, So the bots are one thing. The thing that concerns me is we actually wrote about this last night. Is the company Aggregate IQ, and they're a little Canadian firm who do like data analytics and like market analysis and demographics things. And they worked on, so of all the money that Leave spent during the campaign, 40% of it went to Aggregate IQ, not just like Leave.eu, all of the Leave campaign groups.
Oh, wow.
40% of their money went to one company who are owned by this guy, Zach Massingham, who's a Canadian.
Yeah.
But I think it's SCL, who are like the parent company of Cambridge Analytica, who also gave the Leave campaign free services. And they're like a psychographic analysis group with like links to Robert Mercer and Paul Manafort and people in Putin's inner circle. They had a phone number listed on their website that was for a Victoria, British Columbia office. And it was your guy, Zach Massingham, who is the founder of Aggregate IQ. So there's lots of really like unsettling links there to some really rich people who have been involved in Brexit, in the Trump campaign, in Ted Cruz's campaign. There's a lot of things that I think are still to come to light. But you're here to talk about simple politics.
Yes, I am. Yeah.
So why don't you give us a little bit of background? What is it? Why did you start it?
So I'll go right back to the beginning. I was a teacher and I worked briefly at Parliament's Education Service. I was there for about 3 years. So I got to know Parliament very well, and I've always been interested in teaching citizenship and politics, and I taught politics A-level. And so a lot of people would ask me where to go for really clear explanations of what's going on. And I never had anywhere to point them to because the media tends to focus on scandal, and it tends to focus on controversy and arguments and personality, and actually just this is the law that's being debated is very hard to find. And so I became increasingly frustrated that it didn't exist, and I also wasn't enjoying teaching as much as I had done in the past. And so I went part-time and launched Simple Politics in order to fill the gap that I saw. And initially, the biggest focus was on the website. And the website was breaking down every law in front of Parliament, every bill. And pretty quickly, I realized that people aren't going to go onto this. Not many people are going to go somewhere else online to find this stuff. And that social media was where I needed to be. So I launched the social media feeds on Twitter and on Facebook, and they were pretty well received. So that led to, I mean, now a lot of the work is on social media, on Twitter and on Facebook, and it's just to bring people clear, accurate, and impartial updates on what's going on and the processes involved and arguments either way on different topics. It started soon after the general election in 2015, and I had no idea where politics was going to go at that point. I thought I'd be nicely covering standard same old politics, and that would be a nice little journey. And then it's all been quite interesting.
So
since then.
Well, you could say you were a pioneer in the field of fighting against fake news.
I don't think I would use the word pioneer. I'm not sticking any flags anywhere. All of this is mine, but I was coming at it from an education background. I wanted to help people who wanted to know more about politics and about Parliament, and I can't, whether people are engaged in politics or not isn't something I can really help with. whatever engages people. So, I mean, this year, obviously Brexit's engaged some people in politics who weren't engaged before. Grenfell has engaged people in politics. And then it could be, I live in East Kent, and there's a lot of talk at the moment about the council cutting funding to the buses. And so there's lots of people. I saw that
last night. Is that real? Is that legitimately real? They want to cut all the bus services?
They've got very little money, and they're trying to work out what they can cut. So at the moment, I think it's a consultancy phase. I don't think the buses are being cut tomorrow.
Oh well, that's probably prudent. Bring in a couple of consultants.
Given the public outcry, I don't know if they'll then. I don't know what they're going to do. But the point is, what events engage people in politics. But what happens then is where I can help. I want to be a nice little welcome mat into the world of politics. Because it's very hard to start from scratch, not really knowing anything about politics, and then something engages you. Where do you go? Either you try the traditional media, all of whom use lots of jargon and don't explain from the beginning, or you go on social media where it's very hard to know who to trust, where lots of things that appear simplified are actually campaigning. And there's a confusing world out there, and simple politics can just be, this is what's going on, this is how it works, this is the process, here's what's happening. Having just talked about the buses, I don't really cover local politics because I don't have capacity.
Fair.
At the moment, I'm pretty busy.
I can imagine, yeah.
Covering national politics. But yes, I like the welcome mat analogy. We're a second stage. You're engaged by something else, and then simple politics is there to help you through it. Although a lot of people who follow us on social media are already quite engaged, but quite like just having the updates. It's a fairly easy way of keeping tabs on what's going on.
Well, something I find useful with it is it's just if you say you're like maybe not quite sure on an issue, or we would write or try to anyway, write quite a lot of explainers where we would be being like, look, this is what the issue is, this is why people think it's controversial, this is what happens going forward, this is what's likely to happen, that sort of thing. So but for me, I find it really useful to just be able to go somewhere and have someone just lay things out really simply. Just if I'm not particularly familiar with an issue, if it's something I don't feel like I've got like a whole lot of background knowledge on, that you just need a bit of a grounding before you can start to, talk about things about what's going on. Because it's not as complicated as people would probably think a lot of the time. Because I don't know, maybe some people are like, oh, politics is too complicated, and they imagine this like 48-dimensional chess that people are playing, and it's, you just got to be like, no, people aren't that smart.
Well, it's difficult, isn't it? Because some things aren't that. So many issues in politics, the closer you look at them, the more complicated they become. And certainly when we talk about Parliament, that's the case. Parliamentary debate has so many rules and so many different possibilities that it can feel really hard to get a grip on. So yeah, yes. Well, while some issues can be simple, I think it can be quite hard to filter out the bits that you don't need to think about. Yeah, the filtering is often the hardest thing to do when you're trying to boil something down to its bare bones to stick on social media. And yeah.
Try and get people an explanation that they can use constructively.
Yeah, something to be useful. Yeah, you can't take everything out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, do you think facts matter anymore? Do they have a place?
Of course they do. Yeah, I think in fact the way I do lots of work in schools as well, and what I start off with them is a very basic little question. So I just say, open the assembly with a question of sweets. I've got 8 sweets. I've got 10 people. I can't buy more sweets. I can't cut the sweets in half. what am I going to do? And I take 3 ideas from the students. Primary schools always suggest no one gets any sweets. Their sense of fairness is huge. And then we vote on which one to do, and then we would action it. And so in that you've got a problem. You debate solutions. You vote on which solution you want to do, and then you take action. And that's how politics work. Okay, the basis of it is you've got 8 sweets and 10 children. That's the fact. Then you get onto the solutions and the voting part. And that's what all the politics you see on TV. That's when people talk about politics. It's that solutions and voting bit they're talking about. But you need the facts to be able to have that conversation. And too often that conversation drifts away from those facts.
That really goes to something I've been thinking about quite a lot. And so I was watching a Joe Rogan podcast, and he was talking to like a debunker. Someone who goes and tries to get conspiracy theorists. He says he wants to bring them back down to earth.
Okay.
A little bit. So he doesn't go after like people who are genuinely concerned about like actual corruption and things. He goes after people who are like propagating like flat earth theories and being like, look, this is like, because a lot of it is based on people like trying to perform their own experiments about like gravity and that sort of thing. And just doing the experiments wrong, and that's where they get this idea that maybe science is lying to them, and then like it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, once in terms of your own mind, once you have an idea that you've formed and find yourself, it's sometimes very difficult to dislodge it, and they get further and further in, and the way he tries to talk to them is to get back to this idea of what he calls ground truth. So it's these things that you can like demonstrably accurately prove, and you can do like experiments with gravity and with free falls, and you can like show them how to take the scope of the horizon and take that up to a mountain and be like, look, there's the curve of the earth, you can measure it with this. And I really think people could have much better political conversations if they applied that theory to the way they approach a debate, or the way that they approach discussing an issue. You like get to that, right, here's what we agree on, here's what is happening, and then you can debate your either own interpretation of that, or what you feel should be done from it, or what it means. But like, you can't dispute the like facts.
yes, although it's very, statistics can show various different things, can't they?
Yeah, obviously data is easy to manipulate.
Yes. So sometimes the 8 sweets and 10 children part of that question isn't as solid, because facts are hard to establish sometimes. I mean, today the big story is apart from Donald Trump, the big story is about this disability, this plan for helping disabled people into work.
Okay.
And the government have their own facts, and a lot of other people disagree with that, and it's very hard, partly because the word disability covers so much. There's such a wide range of disability. I think facts do matter, but finding out what the facts are is sometimes not that easy. And I think one thing that doesn't happen very often is when you is determining the terms you're using. I mean, as a teacher, even at GCSE level, you're like, right, get the question. In the first paragraph of your answer, you have to define the key terms in the question so we know where you're going with it. Whereas this, for example, this disability plan that's been announced today, improving lives, the future of work, health and disability, I haven't heard anyone talk about exactly what they mean by people with disabilities. Exactly, they don't define the terms, so it's very hard. So that then makes the debate very nebulous, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it's actually kind of baffling sometimes the way people can have a debate over like what facts they want to use and just sort of like walk around the debate and have like a 30-minute discussion without actually saying anything.
Yes.
So last night I was watching the Nolan Show, which is a show in Northern Ireland. It's just about politics, and Stephen Nolan, he's like a BBC radio presenter or whatever. He comes on, he always has.
Yes, I know. So yeah.
Yeah, okay, so there's a lot. Basically, people make fun of him for having a lot of people shouting at each other because they get all the extreme guests on, which is kind of what he does. He's a bit of an outrage merchant. He's not as bad as Piers Morgan, but that would be harsh on him. But they had Jim Allister, who is a really, really hardline unionist, discussing Brexit, and he just it was amazing to watch, like truly incredible to watch him like disregard about 8 different people being like, yeah, but Northern Ireland voted to remain, like as a whole, and he was like, well, no, the whole of the United Kingdom voted to leave. And I thought that was just like a perfect analogy for the way that people can pick the facts that they want. And it's like people wanted to talk about Northern Ireland and Brexit and the sort of implications and be like, look, well, you know, Northern Ireland didn't all want to leave. We were like majority remain, potentially because of the impact it's going to have on us. People will be just a bit more cognizant, or just because like the actual issue of the Irish border is a lot more real for us. And he was just bouncing around like 8 different people being like, yeah, but Northern Ireland voted to remain. And he was like, no, the UK voted to leave. And then someone went, yeah, but do you not care about the people in your country? And he was like, I give but a passing thought to it. And I was like, whoa, like this is an incredible like dismissal of facts that you don't want to use.
Yes, but and then I mean, this is the thing about political debate, isn't it? If you watch Question Time, the audience often just want to make their point. It's not about listening and going, oh, hang on, very few people at a Question Time on a BBC Question Time audience are being persuaded by the arguments they're seeing in front of them. It's like it's almost, you know, you've got your person on the panel you support, and you kind of agree and you'll cheer when they say something, and then you'll stick your hand up to make the point you want to make. There's very little listening in a lot of debate. There's a lot of, I'm going to go in with this point, and I'm going to make my point, and then I'm going to sit down and huff and puff when anyone makes a point that isn't what I said. Mm-hmm. And I think we could all benefit from a bit more listening.
That is a very nice way to put it.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Well, no, I get a lot of the time you hear it's just like, people need to stop being stupid and believe the real truth, the real news.
Oh gosh. Oh yes. I have not been too controversial when I say that you just need to watch out for anyone who tries to tell you the real truth. The facts behind. Yeah. The real truth. Just a phrase that only tends to be used by people who have a very loose relationship with the truth.
Well, I think I saw the other day like a clinical psychologist had gone through like a list of phrases that people use when they're about to lie. And let me be clear, or we need to be clear about this, is like one of the top indicators. That's just like, you should be like neon red flashing signs going off being like, liar, liar.
Well, I'm not sure, because it may be used before lies, but it's certainly also used to buy time, and it's used for lots of reasons that aren't lying. Let me be clear is a way of building up to a point. You try to when a politician goes into an interview or to make a speech, they know the 4 things they want the public to take away from that interview. And so they will try to highlight them with phrases like, let me be clear. I don't think we should have the liar red light flash every time we hear that phrase, because we do hear it a lot. And I for one believe that most politicians, most of the time, are telling us the truth, are telling us what they believe to be the truth.
Yeah, that's a very different distinction. Like people always get this idea of the really evil, like maniacal politicians in the conservative benches, especially. And the thing I would always tell people is to remember that no one is the villain of their own story.
Yeah. Yes. And there's an excellent Mitchell and Webb sketch when they're dressed as Nazis, and one says to the other, "You know, we're all in black, and we've got that kind of big scary eagle as our emblem. Are we the bad guys?"
Yeah.
It just illustrates, that point quite nicely. It's everyone. There are especially. Well, both sides, actually. I mean, generally, the left think the right are horrible and the right think the left are stupid. And all the abuse that's thrown around. And there was a Labour MP recently saying she would never be friends with a Tory.
Laura Pidcock.
Yes. I mean, that suggests a level of horribleness of all Conservative MPs that everyone is trying to make the country better in their own way. Everyone wants the same thing. Everyone wants a happy, harmonious, prosperous country. And they just have different visions of how to get to that point.
Not Jeremy Corbyn. He hates Britain. Didn't you know that?
Who hates Britain?
Jeremy Corbyn hates Britain.
Yes. He didn't even sing the national anthem. What a rotter. Yeah, I mean, but exactly. It's, they're the Labour are planning a run on the pound.
Yep.
They're
going to crash the economy.
They're going to crash the economy. Your children are going to be paying off Labour's debt for centuries. They're just evil people who don't care about your children's future. It's just all nonsense, isn't it? It's just. And it goes through from, you watch PMQs, you watch the abuse that politicians throw at each other, and then they condemn abuse online.
I know, it's hilarious.
Where do they get the idea to abuse each other from?
Oh.
And it goes stronger. There's all the death threats. I mean, it's just. Again, this is what Simple Politics is all about. It's about encouraging people to have nice conversations, to have proper debates about their visions for the country and the way to achieve it. Because that's what politics is about. It's about getting the best for everybody. And how you're going to get there.
I think that, ultimately it's about trying to get us to a place where we all live a happier, less stressful, and more prosperous life. People forget that that's what people were voting for with Brexit as well. Sometimes people like genuinely believe we will be better off. It's like, whether you think that is grounded in the biggest pile of steaming horse shit that you've ever seen, or whether you believe that they're being sincere and that could genuinely happen. People weren't voting out of spite. They weren't like in the voting ballot being like, "Ooh, my grandkid, he wasn't very grateful at dinner last week. I think I'll screw his future," and then put it. That wasn't their motivation. Yeah, and there are lots of theories about why people voted to leave. From the idea that they just hate the establishment, and the very convincing narrative of the Brexit vote will be a vote away from the establishment. But that's about wanting a better future with a different set of breaking away from the elite career politicians. So it's exactly what you're saying. It's, I've got a chance to vote to make the country better. I'm going to do that. Whichever side you want it to tick. Yeah, well, some people I've seen write about how it was, in essence, Boris Johnson made it a referendum on giving the NHS more money.
Well, people like the idea of extra money for the NHS, don't they? I find it interesting the lack of accountability for that claim in particular. I find very interesting. Is that no one accepts it now, and that's kind of shrugged off. In a general election, if you say something, you then have to deliver on it.
Oh, that's not true.
And
Look at the Conservative manifesto. It's all out the window.
Well, they
Mostly.
didn't get a parliamentary majority,
Okay,
so
well,
it's a
yeah.
little bit different.
Fair point.
The 300. There are now claims that actually we could have 350 million pounds a week extra. I mean, Jacob Rees-Mogg is very keen on that, and he is on the Brexit Select Committee. He knows Brexit better than anyone, as well as anyone. And there was a study recently that said actually it is possible we'll get 350 million eventually.
I think that could also be partially because it was an outstanding campaigning tool to remind people that we send the EU a lot of money, and that by continuing to suggest that it might be possible, you keep that figure in people's mind. They don't write it off as being outlandish or outrageous or just a propaganda tool. If you have a couple of people still going, we should still be looking at the 350 million, that it just keeps that little tick in people's mind, especially now that the 50 billion or 55 billion or whatever bill they've agreed is in the works, that it just reminds people that it's like, yes, we might be sending them a lot of money now, but we send them a lot of money anyway, and in the long run it'll be better off. And it could just be a way to keep that idea in the public consciousness.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't be so cynical about it. I think that if we, I don't think it's about propaganda. I think that saying in the long run we'll be better off with this is a reasonable thing to say. I mean, we have to pay a large amount now, but it's worth it because we'll be better off. If you believe in Brexit, then that's the only argument to make. Yes, it's expensive, and some Brexiteers, Nigel Farage is very anti all this money being spent, but a lot of moderate Brexiteers say yes, it's a lot of money, but we'll get over this hump, and then life will be better because we'll have our own, Parliament will be sovereign again. We'll have our own rules.
If anyone thinks 50 billion is a lot, I would implore them to go and look at how much money the Bank of England created in 2013 in quantitative easing that just sort of disappeared magically.
Yes. I mean, QE did. I mean, it has had a large impact on
stock prices,
on various on the banking world, I think, and I don't think it's had quite the intended impact elsewhere. But I think 50 billion is quite a lot of money. If you think about it, if it was a single year spending, the NHS is 120 billion a year.
Yeah.
And that's quite, the 50 billion's a fair whack, even for a government.
Yeah.
I mean, government spending is something that is incredibly complicated. And it was the budget last week. And you have to be very careful. I mean, I do a lot of live tweeting. I live tweeting the budget. And you have to be very careful whether you're writing down billions or millions, because sometimes it's very hard to tell which figure is being used, because even though there's obviously a huge difference between a million and a billion, some things get millions and some things get billions, and you need to be quite switched on to follow it, I think. Or maybe I'm just not as good at maths as I think I am.
Well, no, there's definitely a lot of complicated stuff comes through the budget. That's why it takes about a week for people to digest it.
Yes, and there's 4 days of debate after the budget speech.
Yeah, exactly.
And I always look at them and go, oh God, we're really going to be covering that for 4 whole days. But it's amazing that interesting things are still coming out on the 4th day of debate about the budget. Because it's all in that small print, and it's all. And it's all when people have had a decent look at things.
Have Simple Politics covered the Irish border issue? Because I've been trying to find good resources to send people whenever they ask me why I get so frustrated.
We haven't covered it fully, no. Brexit's a very difficult thing for us to cover because earlier in this interview we were talking about, do facts still matter? and facts on Brexit are thin on the ground. It's very hard to find even the terms of debate about what's going on in these negotiations. So I think this morning they were talking about devolving customs to Northern Ireland, so that Northern Ireland could keep things the same, and then the rest of the country could diverge from European Union customs things, whereas Northern Ireland could keep the same customs rules, and therefore that might work with a frictionless border.
That runs into trouble because the DUP leader Arlene Foster says that the Northern Ireland must have the same relationship as the UK in her mind, and there would be uproar because that would mean there would have to be some form of border in the Irish Sea.
Yes,
and that's not a thing that unionists will take lightly.
Yes.
You see, a couple of years ago, people spent 2 months on the streets protesting a flag being taken down from City Hall.
Yes.
Yes. People. This is not a normal community that you're talking to. Like, I know them. I live here. You're not talking to people who base their decisions in anything other than their desire to remain part of the United Kingdom. That is like the be all and end all. Yes.
I find Northern Ireland politics fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. We've been covering the attempts to get the assembly back up and running. We're doing weekly updates on that.
I'm sorry.
But generally, as I was saying, we don't cover kind of politics in Kent. We don't really cover the devolved, what goes on with the devolved. There isn't the capacity.
That's
Hopefully fair. One day we'll be working out of a huge buzzing office, at which point we can have a Northern Ireland correspondent who just focuses on Northern Ireland. But for now, I haven't got the capacity, and it's so complicated, and it's so. I mean, I find it absolutely amazing. I mean, it seems to me, that we haven't got Northern Irish Assembly because they can't agree on Scots Gaelic.
Yep.
The curriculum.
Yep. That's essentially it. Yeah.
And I don't know anything about Scots Gaelic. If I'm being entirely honest with you, I probably didn't know it existed until it came up as a thing.
Yep.
But I'm sure it's a very important issue to some people.
It's not. No one cares about Ulster Scots.
So
they had a helpline for it for like 4 years, and about 3 people rang, and someone got paid to sit at the helpline. The issue is that the DUP need something in exchange for allowing an Irish Language Act that they promised 18 years ago. But honestly, right, here's where I would love Simple Politics to sit down and lecture some politicians and be like, right, here's the reality. Please talk about this because this worries everyone in the country. So Britain wants the take back our borders, take back control thing, right? Fine. That's, that immigration became a big part of the debate. The Leave side won. Not particularly happy about it. Not sure that people knew what they were voting for, but until we have like some democratic vote or, parliament or someone says, no, maybe we need to have a think about this, Brexit's pretty much happening, right?
It's happening.
So they want the same relationship for Northern Ireland and the UK. They want a hard border at Calais and a frictionless border in the Republic of Ireland. And they want no border in the Irish Sea. So these things do not add up to a whole, like that. Those are from 2 different worlds. Like this is like a magical fantasy land that people are living in, where that's what can happen.
They use the phrase "creative solutions," don't they?
Right. Okay. They talk about like the American-Canadian border. I've been across the American-Canadian border. It was terrifying. I had to like grab everything off of my train. It was then searched by like dogs and agents. I had to go through like passport control. I had to fill out forms. Like that was not a frictionless border. And if you want control of immigration, right? The four freedoms are indivisible. In that, they're like the four pillars of Europe, or that's what holds up Europe's like principles. It's like freedom of movement, people, goods, and capital. You can't change that, right? The EU could choose to, but they're not going to, because then people get nitpicky about what things they want to adhere to. That those things are like their pillars. So you have to accept that you're going to either need single market access or something exactly equivalent to, or you're going to need a border. Pick one. I don't care which, just pick one, and then we can talk about it.
Yes, and that border could be in the Irish Sea, not on the Northern Ireland-Ire border.
Yeah, but like yes. if you're gonna do, but then if you mention that, all the unionists go, no, we don't want that. That's separating. That's suggesting that Ireland is a whole thing, and then Britain is a whole thing, and that they're separate, and that Northern Ireland isn't a part of the United Kingdom, and that is a massive threat to their identity.
Yes, I can see that. And I mean, if it's true that we need to solve the Northern Ireland border issue in order to move on to the trade negotiations, then it's going to be a while before we can move on to the trade negotiations, which is really problematic. And I think yes, civil politics. I don't think we have covered the border properly having this conversation with you, but I think when we do, which I might get to today, it's just about mapping out the options available.
Yeah.
And saying this is, because that's what we do. These are the different options. What would you like?
Yeah.
But there would have to be a big asterisk that says the focus is on creative solutions, and there might be something that's not here that we end up with.
But it's been 18 months and I've seen no creative solutions.
I mean, you've just told me why it doesn't work.
I've seen creative ways to.
Was quite clever.
I agree, but they just say no. Like the EU have said, Northern Ireland could have a different relationship. We could have special status, which I'd be fine with. I wouldn't be particularly happy that I had to go through passport control to get to mainland Britain, but like I could probably deal with it. They could maybe have like a fast track line for people coming from Ireland. I don't know, something to make it a bit easier. And it's just it just baffles me, because it needs to, like, people need to sit down and be like, yes, we want, decide what their priorities are and move forward with it, rather than like live in this magical world where they can tick all of the above boxes and
it's just very, very difficult to, when you have such entrenched positions. And I mean, the all of this makes me realize what an amazing thing the Good Friday Agreement was. How they managed, I was a teenager at the time, but and I don't know that much about it, but Tony Blair and Peter Hain and some of the other people involved did an amazing job getting their power sharing agreement, getting their Northern Ireland Assembly up and running. Yeah. And it's only now becoming clear to me just how impressive that was. Because seeing the negotiations around the border, seeing negotiations around getting the assembly back up and running, it's hard.
Yeah.
I mean, that's super hard negotiations to be part of. You're right. A flag was taken down and everyone was on the streets.
Yeah. That's like I like to remind people of that. It's
Yeah.
like dismiss the idea of that like whatever solution will happen, they'll be fine. No one will protest. No, those troubled times are gone. That doesn't happen anymore. People don't throw petrol bombs. It's like, no, trust me. If someone doesn't get their way, which is going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, someone a comedian was saying that their Northern Irish grandparents get up earlier in the morning to be British for longer.
Oh yeah,
which is a nice way of putting it. So what do you think the solution might be?
They honestly, like, I don't see any solution that isn't some form of single market access for the whole of the UK. Like realistically, that's the way that you have a frictionless border, is by having a frictionless border everywhere in the UK. Like and to be honest, I think we may very well in the end see that's what happens, because you heard all the red lines for 18 months from the Conservatives. We won't pay this amount of money. That's ridiculous. We will just walk away. And then what they've agreed, 50 billion. Just like spent 18 months protesting the thing they initially agreed to. 18 months protesting the thing they've now agreed to. So I think that might be, I feel like that might be a recurring theme, is David Davis walking back from Brussels with his tail between his legs, whenever he suddenly realizes that the no deal thing is a cliff edge that would just utterly ruin us. And whether he probably always thought that.
I mean, with my simple politics hat on, I have to point out that some people disagree. That some people say that just leaving and getting on with it is okay.
You see, I would say that, right, if I lived in the UK and didn't have to deal with the border, because no deal means no trade agreement, means no free movement, means a border.
Yes.
So that just it's too explosive an issue, unfortunately. I've never been a fan of the no deal rhetoric. I would quite enjoy if we just had a lovely free trade agreement. If we're going to go one way, I would much prefer we didn't pay £50 billion for a free trade agreement with a free trade bloc we could be one of the controlling powers of. Still not really sure that's the smartest move in the world.
But then, you're a Remainer.
I am. I'm a Remoaner.
All your arguments are saying, well, wouldn't it be better if we stayed in the EU? Which is fine and logical, and it's consistent. but it doesn't. As we are leaving the EU, and I don't think Theresa May is going to, in the time frame between now and the 19th of March 2019, it would take a pretty seismic shift for Theresa May to announce a second referendum, or even to unilaterally say we're not going to leave the EU. So all the Remain side, who are spending all their time saying, well, this is stupid, we need to stay in the EU, it's a difficult position to take, given the fact we're leaving the EU.
Yeah, I do often have to. I have a bet with a family friend of mine who I have several bets with. One of them is that if Jeremy Corbyn is the next Prime Minister, I will be a significantly richer man. Which I'm very much hoping that happens. But on the result of the election night for the Brexit referendum, I was in a bit of shell shock and made a little bet with him that nothing would happen. And my feeling was initially that looked relatively likely, and then Theresa May sort of Article 50'd it, and it sort of looked like that hope had gone. And then every now and again, I just get this little sort of, maybe I could still be right feeling.
Well, I mean, in order to Brexit, we need the Great Repeal Bill, which isn't called that anymore. The European Union Withdrawal Bill.
Yeah.
Needs to get through Parliament, and it's having a pretty rough time in the Commons. And the government, because the DUP are backing the government on this bill, they're stopping all the amendments getting in. Then we'll see. I think it's the 14th of December we've got the final votes on it in the Commons, and we'll see whether this the 20th of December it is. Okay. Wednesday the 20th. The final votes will be around. There'll be 8 hours of debate from 12:30, so about 8:30, and we'll see the votes on getting that 19th of March 2019 date written in law. If they go ahead and try and put that in, and who knows, it might not pass, it might pass, whatever. It doesn't really matter. I don't think it's going to be. It makes too much difference whether that date's on the bill or not. But then, if it goes through, maybe unamended, maybe a couple of changes, fine. Then it's going to go to the House of Lords.
Well, the Lords are going to tear it to shreds.
It's going to be chaos in the House of Lords.
Yeah.
They are going to add amendment after amendment after amendment.
Oh, it's going to be. This is why the 2-year figure baffled me, right? It's like anyone who's like, I was lucky enough to go to school where I was able to do politics at GCSE and A level, and whilst you kind of learn that the House of Lords kind of got neutered a bit in 2000, was it 2000, 98, 99, something around then. Anyway, when Tony Blair came in, I can't remember the exact year that they did the reform, but it was pretty sure it was his first term. But
it was his first term for sure.
That they essentially got neutered, but they can still cause a lot of havoc.
Yes, and then so in January or February or whenever the EU withdrawal bill hits the House of Lords, we're going to hear a lot about Lords reform.
Yeah,
yes, there will be lots of threats.
I hadn't even considered that. That's a really good point.
Because the people voted to leave, the Commons will have voted the elected representatives will have voted the bill through, and then you're going to have the unelected, who are unbelievably, the House of Lords is incredibly made up of Remainers. So it's going to be,
which is interesting because a lot of people who stand to benefit potentially, again, no facts, all speculation, but potentially benefit from a hard Brexit, where no deal, where Britain turns itself into a little bit of a tax haven. They don't have to adhere to all the new EU tax evasion regulations that are coming in. People who they have the ability and the resources to, offshore money, run through like pass-through accounts, like create shell companies, are those who stand to benefit. And quite a lot of the Lords is made up of people who would probably benefit from that.
Well, I think again, this is a narrative that the left put forward quite a lot, is that rich conservatives vote through privatization of the NHS because they personally will benefit from it. I like to believe that our politicians don't do that. I like to believe that our politicians put the country first, and whether or not they would be made incrementally richer by Brexit or Remain, they look at the best thing for the country and would go with that.
Well, I will probably disagree on that. I'm a little bit more cynical about the motivations of the Conservative Party. I feel like it's more that they don't get affected by that change. Do you know what I mean? They'll have their private health insurance. It doesn't matter to them. They think they're doing the right thing, but probably won't see the effects personally hit them.
Well, all MPs have surgeries. It's not just Labour MPs that have real people coming to talk to them about their real concerns.
Yeah, but that doesn't, in my mind, if you believe that you're doing the right thing, some complaining people are just, the haters, especially these days. They're, momentum plants, or they're or they're like, people just, haters, Labour voters, extreme Marxists who are coming to take down your free market ideology. You just sort of switch off a bit if I've got my cynical hat on.
I'm afraid I couldn't disagree more. I think that Conservative MPs are just as likely to take their constituents' cases as seriously. I think when people come in talking about real hardship, the MPs listen and they do what they can. Sometimes they think that there is. I don't know where I'm going with this point. I think that everyone cares. I really do, and I don't think I could run Simple Politics if I didn't actually. Both, yeah. And then, I mean, this is exactly the kind of thing that I get accused of bias for, because I'm not reporting the terrible things that one side are doing, which I should be focusing on more. But I think that the vast majority of politicians are in the game to do the best they can for the country, not in order to promote legislation that's going to make their lives better. I think so, yeah. So like I say, I don't think you were talking about the House of Lords and Brexit. I think that a lot of the Remainer members of the House of Lords could benefit financially from Brexit, but are still Remainers because I think it's the best thing for the country.
Well, yeah. Well, as much as you can, if you say you get rid of all the tax evasion regulation, you can offshore money as much as you like. It doesn't really help if the economy is screwed. And if you believe that the economy is going to be screwed by Brexit, then, unless you're one of these disaster capitalists,
yes,
it's unlikely to benefit you if the country is in the toilet. Not that I'm saying that's what's going to happen, but what do you think the proposals would be to reform the Lords? Have you any sort of inkling of how they would?
A report's just come out saying 600 members, 15-year terms.
Okay, so elected?
No, I think still appointed.
Okay, by who? 600 people every 15, or well, what would be like rotating, like the Senate in America, where you'd have, say, every 5 years. So every election cycle, you'd have like
every 5 years, I suppose. I don't know much about it, but they were talking about it at PMQs yesterday.
Okay.
So I only know the figures from that. So they are already. Damien Green was said we're looking at Lords reform. So
So they're already anticipating it.
Anticipate, yeah. So when I was working at Parliament and I got to know the House of Lords quite well, the more I know about the House of Lords, I quite like the House of Lords. I quite like the self-selection of, you've got a very large number of members of the House of Lords with a very large range of expertise, and they self-select whether they go to a debate or not, depending on their expertise. And that's a very sensible way to run things. If I really know what I'm talking about when it comes to gardening, right? I'm not gonna. I might choose not to go to a vote on
fiber optic broadband
or whatever. And I think that, and you only get paid the expenses or whatever for the days you do go. So it's not costing anyone anything for me to be a member of the House of Lords with my gardening expertise. All the days they're not talking about gardening and I'm not going to the House of Lords, that costs nobody anything. And then on the days that I am there, when it's a big gardening debate, I'm in. That makes sense to me.
Do you think that the Conservatives have the political capital to do it? Because Blair needed big mandate to be able to get through that.
Yes, I think that they do, because the Labour Party are likely to support Lords reform.
Even if it's not in their best interest?
What's that?
Even if it's not in the best interest of the Labour Party, in terms of the Remainer side of their party?
Well, I mean, I think Labour have been pro Lords reform in general. I mean, they didn't there was the initial reforms in the first term, and then they didn't, and they kept those 92 hereditary peers there to hold themselves to ransom to ensure that they did carry on and do more reform.
Okay.
But then they never quite got around to it.
There were
I think David
proposals
said,
in like what 2004 or something, wasn't there? And then they never really went anywhere.
Yeah, it's been talked about, and then Cameron said he thought Lord's reform was a third term issue. He didn't,
see his third term. I never thought I'd be sitting here kind of wishing David Cameron was still in charge.
I think quite a few people feel that way, but it's
like, remember Gordon Brown?
I mean, Gordon Brown's still doing bits and pieces, isn't he?
Yeah. I feel bad for the guy. As much as I wasn't a huge fan, I kind of feel bad for the way his public image fell apart.
Well, it's difficult when you take over after a long-term prime minister. I mean, it happened to John Major as well, didn't it? I mean, people don't really think that John Major did anything at all. Where he was in charge for quite a few bits. Yeah.
Well, he was in charge. What was it? It wasn't up. Was he? No, it wasn't 8 years, was it?
It was certainly longer than people remember because he won the 92 election, didn't he? So it was at least 5 years.
Yeah, hang on. So with Thatcher resigned in 89 or 91?
89, I think.
89. Yeah. So it would have been the best part of 7-8 years. Yeah, jeez.
Yeah.
I didn't even realize that.
But it's very difficult because he then faced a young Tony Blair who could command this huge popularity, having narrowly lost in 1992. They had 5 years of growing in popularity. Blair did all this stuff. It was very difficult. And then you see almost exactly the same thing happening with Gordon Brown and David Cameron. A kind of a brand new type of conservative leader, that had Michael Howard, that had Ian Duncan Smith, that had William Hague, and then David Cameron, who's just so light years apart from those three guys, and seems to be exciting and gaining popularity. And it's very difficult to be that establishment prime minister who's kind of not quite as popular as the previous prime minister, with an opposition that is getting bigger and bigger and more popular. And you could possibly say that Theresa May's facing the same thing now. You had David Cameron, and then Theresa May's come in really difficult circumstances, with a really divided country. And I mean, so Jeremy Corbyn's not as young as Cameron or Blair were, but he's certainly invigorating the opposition, and has this kind of insurgent, Labour seem to be getting bigger and bigger. The polls suggest that they're either equal or more popular than the Conservatives.
I think they've got a couple of points on the average. I think they've like 1 or 2 points on them, which would leave them where they're sitting in the polls right now, would leave them, I think, with either their biggest or second biggest vote share since the Second World War.
Yeah.
Which is outrageous. Like, they were only 0.7% behind the 2001 Tony Blair landslide share of the vote. That's how popular Jeremy Corbyn is. Like, I don't think that goes. It's also the destruction of the other parties, isn't it? Because the Conservatives are also would get bigger vote shares than they have done for a long time. It's because the Liberal Democrat votes are disappearing. The SNP are getting less votes than they used to, fewer votes than they used to. And then UKIP have almost disappeared. I mean, Henry Bolton was announced as the new UKIP leader in September, and I've hardly seen him anywhere. I watch a lot of political TV, and I hardly see Henry Bolton at all. Because, realistically, they're kind of irrelevant at this point.
Well, I mean, if
Farage was still their leader, I wouldn't say that.
Farage is still interviewed and Henry Bolton isn't.
It's because he's the face. He was the.
He's the mugshot.
And then
the Green Party seemed to find the Green Party seem to be focusing more on their environmental message because where they had become more left, focusing more on their social justice agenda. Now Corbyn and Momentum have dragged the Labour Party to the left. They're in a lot of that space. So the Green Party have gone back to being green,
which is great.
But they've still had a lot of their votes taken by Labour. So
they're in a couple of council elections recently. They've been performing pretty well. The Green Party. And every time I see Caroline Lucas on TV, I just sort of have to applaud. Everything she says is just like, I don't know who trained her in media or if she's just that sharp, but every time she's on TV, she uses those seconds like perfectly. Like she has what she wants to say and she does not sugarcoat it, and she's always scathing and just like nails it every time. Like I'm yet to see her ever be embarrassed, proven wrong, like out debated in any, like, not that she's on TV a lot, so obviously it might happen if she was, PM or whatever, and we can all dream, but she really, really amazes me with just how sharp she is.
Well, I'm sure she'd be delighted to hear that. Yes, I mean, she as a one MP party, she gets a lot of coverage, and that's got to be testament to a good press team somewhere getting her all that attention. Obviously, I can't. I'm not going to sit here and fanboy Caroline Lucas in the same way as you have the freedom to do.
Well, I just think that she. I could fanboy about all of those things without agreeing with a single thing that she says.
Yeah.
Jacob Rees-Mogg, I think, is probably a massive hypocrite and not really a fantastic Christian, but arguably. But I still respect that he's incredibly articulate and, very much is able to tap into and be the face of a lot of people who are very, very much like free market intellectuals and libertarian economists and that sort of side of the Conservative Party, and that he's very popular because he's very good at being who he is, if that makes sense.
Oh no, yeah, absolutely. He's created his own brand very, very, very well, and he's got all that following.
Yeah, Mogmentum.
And I'd imagine Theresa May would like him in the government, so to force him into not criticising the government so much.
I thought he was going to get a cabinet post, and he might still if some more of them resign. But I thought with those two resignations and Boris's to come, which he should be resigning realistically, he just doubled a British woman's prison sentence potentially, which is horrifying. Like, it's the one thing you hope. It's like you go on holiday, you get in trouble. The British Foreign Office are like, they're the people that you can rely upon to not make things worse.
Yes, but I mean, I forget who it was. It was her husband or her brother was saying that said that the Johnson resigning wouldn't help.
No, I don't think that would help the situation with the woman in prison. Like, the damage has been done, right? What doesn't help is the incompetence in government. Like, it's more about the principle of it, and it's something that's been eroded on both sides of the Atlantic. Is this idea of competence? Like, Michael Fallon, all credit to him, he resigned, when all these allegations started coming out. I'm confused as to why he resigned as a cabinet member and not an MP. Why is the standard higher? Why is it okay to be accused of things as an MP and not as a cabinet member? But he still resigned from the cabinet. But the idea that the cabinet is full of the government, the people who support the government, who believe in all the positions of the government and are working in the best interests of the government, has completely been eroded and completely demolished because of all the sniping around Brexit. And like collective cabinet responsibility is this great principle that I learned about in school, and it's where all the cabinet go into their meetings, they have their arguments in there, and they come out and they all support the position of the cabinet. If you don't want to, you go sit in the back benches. You do not sit within the cabinet, argue in the room, come to a position in the cabinet, and then go out and criticise the decision you've come to as a cabinet. Or you resign or you get sacked. And Theresa May doesn't have the power to sack anyone. So, okay, she doesn't have the political capital to sack anyone. Not the power. She could sack people if she wanted, but maybe it's a little bit they don't want to let Boris get away with it.
Well, I mean, we'll see.
I say it, I mean the Leave vote.
He's a controversial politician, and people have been calling for his resignation or his firing since he since he first entered the cabinet.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens. I know that people.
Do you think he should resign? What do you reckon?
I think that like I say, the family of the holidaying lady, I forget her name, saying that his resignation wouldn't help. I think that's really useful for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not for me to comment whether someone should resign or not.
Well,
all right, it's time for one more. Do you have one more question?
I got through all the ones that I had down. So
perfect. So, okay.
Yeah, I know we got sidetracked there a lot on a lot of things, but.
But that's the problem with politics, isn't it? There's so much to talk about. There's so much going on, and it's all interesting.
It is.
Yeah, and it's all. And you're just asking me then whether Boris should resign. I mean, there's a lot of questions for 2018, aren't there?
Yeah.
There's a lot to be sorted out in 2018.
Yeah.
And politics isn't going anywhere.
No,
like it's going to be front page. It's going to be big. We're going to have some big questions to answer. Not least over Northern Ireland, but everywhere. It's going to be an interesting year. Yeah.
Well, anyway, thank you very much for chatting to me on the sort of mad roller coaster of topics we managed to cover.
It's a pleasure.
Thanks very much for chatting.
Great. All right. Well, have a good day. Thanks a lot, man.
Thanks very much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, you can subscribe to us on iTunes, on YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. We're on Stitcher. So until next time, thanks very much for listening.